So I definitely missed out on a lot of games from the 2000s and then their sequels into the 2010s, mainly because around that time I was completely obsessed with games like Halo. So I never really looked at games like Mass Effect, which I really should have. It has everything that would make it one of my favorite games of all time. It's an action RPG, the sci-fi epic elements. It was really something that I feel like would resonate with me specifically, being as my favorite franchises are Star Wars and then Halo, but I also really enjoy RPGs as well. So this kind of has all of those elements. And so I really wanted to try Mass Effect out and try it out the whole trilogy. Also, it's made by BioWare in their prime, which they were the developers of my favorite Star Wars game, Knights of the Old Republic. And that was the first thing that I noticed when I booted up Mass Effect was the similarities to KOTOR. One of the first things that you notice is the voice actor for Kaden is the same voice actor for Karth in KOTOR.
The Sith are threatening to overrun our position. We can't hold out long against their firepower.
One of my cousins has an agribusiness. I was thinking of calling him.
But on top of that, when they throw you down into combat, you're running a 3-man squad, same as you would be in Knights of the Old Republic. You still have the whole squad menu where you can upgrade your character and change your armor and weapon attachments, stuff like that. That all kind of felt similar to KOTOR. And then whenever you're in between missions, I felt that the Normandy, which is the ship in Mass Effect, was very similar to the Ebon Hawk in KOTOR. That just acts as your main hub to select your missions, mingle with your crew. Really, it just felt like KOTOR, but more modern. And this time they went with the third-person shooter instead of that real-time turn-based combat. I also felt that the morality system was pulled straight from KOTOR, although I don't think this one had as much of an impact. Maybe that's something I need to do in a future playthrough is try to be like an evil shepherd. But for me, I didn't really look at the morality this go around. Maybe on the next one I will, but the third person shooter combat to me was not great. You could tell, I don't know if they copied or if they were going for more of that Gears of War feel, cover-based shooting. In my opinion, I think Gears just did it better. The guns in the game were not super balanced. I remember just thinking, okay, assault rifle for heavy combat, pistols for like close quarters. No, it's not really like that. By the end of the game, it was just the sniper for everything because it did the most damage. It was semi-auto. The worst thing is you had a little bit of a zoom, but in my opinion, if you were able to control that, it was probably the best gun for most situations. So I would always just use the sniper, and I would have my teammates using the sniper as well, or I would change them up maybe just for like a little bit of variety, but realistically the sniper was the best gun in the game. And then a few of the missions were specifically built around driving, and this game I played on the Legendary Edition, which supposedly is better than the original Mass Effect, like when it came out originally, and it was still like probably some of the worst driving I've ever had to do. And the fact that it was like the entire mission was centered around it was rough. I think the first time I ever tried to play Mass Effect, I kind of stopped at that point because I was like, I just can't, I'm not gonna continue to try this. But this time I forced myself through it, got through the missions, glad I did. But yeah, all I could think was that the driving felt like the controls were similar to the original Halo. Halo had missions that were centered around driving. And even though like Halo 1, the Warthog feels like it's on ice or like glides around the map real easy, it was still way easier to control. And the maps were designed so that driving actually felt natural to a point. Whereas in this one, it was just rough. I didn't like it at all. But if you can get past that, there's some good here, I promise. Also, the boss fights, there was a couple in here that were just tedious. The first one that I can think of is the Thorian towards the beginning of the game. It's like one of the first big boss battles. There was not a lot of variety. Every time something would happen, it was just the same enemies coming at you over and over. And I think in my playthrough, it lasted like 15 minutes and it was just agonizing how long it was taking. But it got better. I mean, the last boss fight with Saren was actually pretty good in my opinion. It wasn't like a good boss battle, but it was better than the Thorian. And there was a little bit of variety in the way that he fought back. First, he was on a glider, and then he becomes like a Geth, I think is what it was. And he could like shoot around the map. You had to like hide and cover, wait for him to like, jump into a corner in his reload animation of some sort, and then you could deal damage, but it wasn't as long either. So that was kind of nice. I will say the UI was a little difficult to navigate, especially when it came to choosing the planet that you were going to travel to. Kind of took a minute to figure it out, and I can tell you from playing the second game a little bit that it got better. And then the last thing I was going to say was the romance was awkward. And for me specifically, it didn't feel natural at all because I wasn't playing as a character that really had romantic interests. I was kind of doing a kind of like Captain Kirk, whatever happens, happens. As long as I'm in control and it's for the best of my crew, that's the decision that I'm going to make. I was nice and I had conversations with my crewmates, but at the end, after having nice conversations with both Liara and Ashley, they both came to me, you've been flirting with both of us, and so you have to choose one or the other. And it's right before you're about to have like this really big like final mission. And all I could think was, this is really not the time to be having this conversation.
Things might become
We've got bigger problems right now, please.
awkward, huh?
But it had to be put into the game because that's whenever you were going to have the romance scene and make it seem like Shepard's been leaning on this one character this whole time. But I don't know, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I'm sure it gets better. I hope it does. But in this game, it was a little rough. But some of the high points, the world building was my favorite. I thought this game really set up this world perfectly. I enjoyed just being in it. I wanted more of it. I loved the different planet designs and the atmosphere that they created. I enjoyed the interspecies politics part of the Citadel. I thought that was actually kind of interesting. That's where it became less like Star Trek and more like Star Wars, kind of a nice in between. Some of the side quests that I did do, I thought they were interesting. I did read a few of the codex entries and I thought that really added to the overall world building. Also, I will say, so as a third person shooter, this is not a great game, but as an RPG, I really enjoyed this because in this game, the choices actually mattered. Some of the decisions that you had to make were pretty tough. I just kept thinking to myself every time a hard decision would come up, all I would think is, what would Captain Kirk do? I have to stay in control. I have to do what's best for the crew and for humanity. So sometimes I had to make a pretty tough decision and I may not have chosen the most popular answer, but choices were made and I stuck to it. The crew I really liked all of them. Kaidan was like the first person that you're introduced to. He's one of the only two humans in your potential squad mates. I looked at him more like he was one of the original crew members of the Normandy, somebody that my character was closer to or could at least have conversations with, kind of like a Spock character that like in between missions I would talk to him first just because I wanted to see what his thoughts on everything were. Holly, I didn't spend too much time with her, but I know her little side story about her species was interesting and I did follow up on that as much as I could. She was probably one of the less interesting characters, but still a really good character. And I did bring her along with me on a few of the missions, but she didn't have a ton to say. I think she has more to do in the later games. You also had Ashley Williams. She's the second human that you find. All of her squad gets wiped out in the initial Geth attack. Then you recruit her. From that point, she's in your crew. She's also one of the potential romance options. Although out of the two that I had, she was the less interesting, I guess. Garrus was probably one of my favorite characters to keep around just because he always had an interesting input whenever a decision or something had to come up. But he is a Turian and you meet him on the Citadel. Along with him, you also meet Rex. Kind of an interesting story, although in my specific playthrough, things didn't go the way they should have, so I kind of missed out on a little bit, but I hear he's also like a really good character, so definitely on my next playthrough, I'm gonna try to focus on him a little bit. All these characters are really interesting to me. I grew attached to them a couple of times in those difficult decisions. Some were lost, and it was emotional for me. I was actually sad, and I was like, oh, that sucks, but I had to keep going forward and keep making decisions for the crew because I had to be the captain and I had to be in control. So I really enjoyed that. I will say the last third of the game was probably my favorite because that's when things really got intense. Things felt a lot more like that sci-fi epic. I thought the end level was really spectacular. Getting to see the Citadel under attack and everything had changed and things seemed hopeless. I really could feel the intensity at that point, and I just really liked the final mission. I thought that it was a good way to end the first game and really get me excited for Mass Effect 2. So my final thoughts are Mass Effect definitely feels like a game from 2007, but it was still really good. Honestly, like looking at it as a game on its own, it was decent. I enjoyed it, but knowing that it's part of a bigger trilogy, that there was more to come, like I got really excited for Mass Effect 2. I can't wait to play the second game. I know the second game is considered one of the greatest games of all time, and from what I have played, which is only like a couple of hours, it is so much larger in scale than the first game, and everything that I had complaints about in the first game has been somewhat addressed in some way. And so on that note, I'm like really excited to play Mass Effect 2 and then eventually Mass Effect 3. And another thing that I really want to do is I want to come back and play these games again, but I want to make the decisions differently. And I want to see how things play out if I do a more evil playthrough. And I want to focus on stories that I didn't follow through on the first time, and then see how it plays out in the sequels. Because I know that whenever you start up Mass Effect 2, you can pull your character from the first game, and all the decisions that you made, bring that over into the second game. And so you have to deal with the consequences of what the decisions you made in the first game, which I think is really cool. Yeah, if there's any other games that like I need to go back and play, leave it in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll be able to put out a lot more of these. But in the meantime, go follow my Twitch at JX_project. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you guys on the next video.